All right, Shalom. First off, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakah HaKodash, and double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. All right, first off, I want to say Shalom to the ones that push this word out in truth and in sincerity, which are the apostles and elders on down to the brothers. And Shalom to the ones that endure this faith until the very end, until the time of Jacob's troubles, which are again the apostles and elders on down to the brothers and a few sisters. All right, so Shalom. So before I get into anything, I want to get, I'm gonna start off with this scripture actually. This is Job 9:24. It says, "The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof." That's the main point here, right? Of what I'm doing this video on. If not, where and who is he? Right? So sometimes, we can even just backtrack. We got a lot of things, that be happening, especially against these other camps. But a lot of times, we can just backtrack to the main point, man. Right? What the main problem is with our people, right? The main lies that's going on in this place, the main thing that runs this society is that Christianity. Right? Now, the brother Amawan, he's been getting into, there's this game that's called Assassin's Creed. It is quite accurate too. You're in Israel. The other one you're in Italy, and they got Rodrigo Borgia's Cesra Borgia, right? I believe Giovanni, right? Now, here's the main point. Because the truth is already out there. It's going to be a long video too, man. The truth is already out there. Through the spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai. Right? The truth is already out there, man. Everybody knows, who that Jesus Christ actually is. Right? So, as we already know, everybody already knows, the elder goes into high details of who he actually is. But, I just want to go into it, right? It's all through the spirit, right? Because, the information, the words of the Lord, Obadiah verse 6, man, how the hidden things of Esau searched out and sought up, right? Through the prophets of Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai. So let's start, from the first, right? This is around the Renaissance period, right? Now, when you go into the word Renaissance, that means, rebirth, right? As I just read, man, he covereth the faces of the judges thereof, if not where, who is he? You already know where I'm going at. The covering up of the image of Yahweh Shai, right? The same things that they did even with, we actually have a book, about the kings of Europe, right? It was actually us, right? A lot of things, man, they started covering up. You saw white blotches being put on them through time, right? Everything started being covered up because they know that the true people, even the true Europeans, were us, right? It was our people. Cesare Borgia, right, which was born in 1475. I have a whole bunch of information up right here, on a separate thing, right? Born in 1475, right, Italy, and died on 1507, right, 31. But that's kind of ironic, actually. It's kind of close, but 33. But he was a cardinal deacon, right? As we already know, he was a cardinal, and he is the son of Rodrigo Borgia, which eventually became, Pope Alexander. I believe the fifth or sixth, right? Now, the early Renaissance was around the 1300s to 1450, and 1450 to 1527, right? So this is definitely around that time. Right now, I got a whole big article that I'm pretty sure a lot of brothers already read it too. It's on the WordPress, right? Now, as you already know, it even states it right here in this article, pretty much if you try to teach your own people this, they're not going to want to learn. Why? Because they've been taught so long to believe in lies. So, and here's another fact about Cesare Borgia. I actually recently just looked into. He actually wore a mask a lot of times because, funny enough, syphilis. He kept having syphilis. That already gives a lot of things away right there. Right? So, as we all know, around the 14 to 1500s, man, he was put up to be the image of Jesus Christ, as everybody knows today. Right? And he was also, in fact, let me read it right here. So it says between 1502 and even 1503, he employed Leonardo da Vinci as a military architect and engineer, in which him and Leonardo da Vinci became intimate instantaneously, meaning they started becoming lovers. Right? It even says they were lovers, and to express his love towards Cesare, Leonardo painted many pictures of him. Right? That also goes into the first image, as the elder here of Baltimore, brings out. The first image was of him, the Jesus Christ image of him with his rod out and saying he is risen. Right? That was painted by, Leonardo da Vinci and also Michelangelo, because they was all having, orgies going on. So it says they painted many pictures of him, and Cesare's father, Rodrigo Borgia, who later became Pope Alexander, under the authority of the Catholic Church, had his son picture put up as Jesus Christ, mostly in the Western Hemisphere. That's why even today in the Western culture, it's always that Jesus Christ. You go to the church, you see nothing but so-called black people eating their soul food and worshiping that white image of Jesus. And then when you tell them that he was not a white man, that's when they say, well, his color don't matter. So I'm gonna get this scripture. I'm gonna get a few scriptures while we're at it. I seen this one in the article too. This is Revelation 12 and 9. It says, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Right? Now, that's not actually, talking about, the devil, Satan himself, man. He's in order, right? He ain't going to be cast out and kicked out of heaven and stuff like that, man. No. That's talking about what? The rulers of this world, man, the elites, right? They're the ones who push this image out still, right? Those weirdos, man, freaks. That's why, back in 10th grade in art class, man, all they kept showing is these damn Renaissance paintings in class. Jesus with slabs of lamb on his nuts. Or God flying into the distance with his ass out. They showed all kinds of freak shit. And they say that that's art, right? Through what? Art imitates life, but it also is another language. And through that language, you can very much change and manipulate somebody's mind, especially through generations. And you leave art like so-called art like that through generations, man, people are going to grow up to that and say, oh yeah, that's Jesus Christ. That's, Julius and Junos touching tip fingers in heaven. Right here, man, it says Cesare had, intimate intercourse with his own sister, Lucretia Borgia, and he killed his own brother, Giovanni, in 1497. Right, Giovanni Borgia. Right, he killed him out of jealousy. That's one thing most people won't say, man. He killed him out of jealousy, just straight up jealousy. And here we go. And his father gave the the Roman Catholic Church pretty much consent allowing his picture to be put up and portrayed as Jesus Christ to deceive the whole world to think Christ is European. Which again, here's where they go off on this article. Them people over there, they're not actually European. The real Europeans are the Israelites, right? Because we ruled that. That's why, during the Dark Ages, that's why they really called it the Dark Ages. Because you had our people ruling Europe. Just like the Roman Empire. During the Roman Empire, you will always think that, the Romans were, even the word Grecian, right? But you always think that the Romans are just white men soldiers, in the Achilles looking armor, right? No, you had mixtures really. You actually had a lot of Jake in the Roman Empire. You had a lot of Jakes or Israelites that were Roman centurions, right? Captains of 100, right? When you go into centurion, that means century. So I'm gonna keep going right here. This article actually goes a little bit more in depth to this, right? There was a competition, which was actually in the Renaissance. Again, rebirth. When you go into rebirth, man, that means recreating. And that's what they was doing around that time. They was recreating a lot of history, right? And Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo was having competitions on who can paint the best Jesus Christ images. And Leonardo won. But through that, they was having, orgies together, all three of them. And then Cesare Borgia was also having orgies with his own father, his own sister, and his brother. This man is a straight up freak. That's why, I never went to, church exactly. Only went there once, but I was little, right? Because our grandmother forced us to when we visited. But I don't know how it goes today, but, the elder told us stories about when he was in church. They had them draw images of Jesus Christ. And, the elder can actually draw really good, right? Especially around that time. That's probably where I get that, art side of me from. And he drew really good images of Jesus. And they said, you didn't draw this because it was too good. That sounds like what they was doing, back then during the Renaissance. They was having competitions of art. And to this day, you see a lot of artists having somewhat type of competitions. It all stems back, history repeats itself. And again, man, it's a saying, if you forget your history, man, you're bound to repeat it again. And that's what's been going on for centuries, man, from the 1400s, even from, the time of the Bible, right? The time of, judges, even us going off and serving other gods. What do you think that's from? Our people been doing that even way before, Cesare Borgia. Right? Our people been worshiping that Christianity, worshiping other gods, other idols, other images. Right? That's why the Lord said, man, you shall not serve other gods or idols or make any graven images, because our people was doing that. But they was also merging gods. So it's the same thing. It was just re-brought back through the Renaissance. But this time, through that image of Jesus Christ, man, that's what really got our people destroyed. That's when they started making, slave Bibles. So I'm going to read this next part, and then I'm going to read another scripture. This is, I believe, the third, fourth, fifth paragraph. It says, the original King James Bible of 1611 had the Apocrypha in it. But in 1928, under the Vatican, they made an agreement to take 14 books out of the King James Holy Bible. Because thousands of years before they put this image up to be, Christ, they found out that it was written in the Wisdom of Solomon, located in the Apocrypha, that they would do this, and the reason for it. So knowing this was written in the Wisdom of Solomon, the Roman Catholic Church took it out of the Bible so the people wouldn't figure out their deception. Right? So that's when you had, the Bible destruction groups, right? That's when you had the slave Bibles, being made, right? That's why you had the Spanish and the Incas, right? That's why the Spanish were heavy around that time. The Renaissance, that's actually what that was about. That's what the Spanish were about. That's why the Spanish, man, they were actually, of Edom. And they was going around conquering. That's why most people in Italy, it even shows that in the game Assassin's Creed, man, a lot of them were speaking Spanish. You had some that was speaking, Italian. You had some that was speaking mixed dialects of Italian and Spanish, and then you had some that was speaking full-fledged Spanish. But they are of the rulers of darkness. Why? Because that's when they was going around enforcing that that Christianity. That's why they went to the Incas, which were Native Americans, man. They gave them a slave Bible. They took out most of the books. And the Incas looked at it and they threw it over the wall. They said, man, we don't want to worship this. So then the Spanish started enslaving them. Right? That's also why you had the Spanish that was going against, Issachar. Right? That's why they conquered them, right? Because they was trying to force their Christianity on them. And they said no. That's why you see most of Issachar or Puerto Ricans or anything like that, man, they speak Spanish because they was conquered by them. That's also, they was forcing Christianity and Islam on them, right? On the Issacharites. That's why you see, even when I went to school, most Islam or people who worship Islam, they were Hispanic. It shows right there, man. History repeats itself and it still makes a big impact. No matter what, it will always do so. So, I want to get these two scriptures, man. This is Revelations 2 and 9. It says, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them that say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Right? So that they say that they're the people of the Most High. And that was originally the plan, ever since the beginning, even from the 1400s, man. They wanted, to put that white image of Jesus Christ on us, throw away the old image, right? The original image that we knew that he was our people, right? Of our complexion. They wanted to throw that out real quick, enforce the slave Bible, put us in slavery and make us read only the slave Bible. Any other thing they did not want us to read. The only time that our people actually did read, because that's another lie that they put. They say that slaves weren't allowed to read, which is true, but they were actually allowed to read in a way. If it's only a slave Bible where it says servants obey your masters. Here's the thing, man. A lot of our people were actually still literate. But they try to say that our people just weren't allowed to read at all, just completely illiterate. No. But any other book or a full Bible, man, they did not want us to read because they knew that our people were literate. So if we got our hands on like a full-on Bible and if the pages weren't ripped out, we'd know. So through that, enslave our people, take us out of that land. By the year 48, put them other people in that land and bring us and keep us over in the Western Hemisphere and believing in that, indoctrinated with that Jesus Christ. Until this day, they're still making plans. And ultimately, that rice grain in your right hand or your forehead. So, this is Isaiah 2 and 8. It says their land also is full of idols. And the Lord screwed us up big time. Their land is also full of idols. They worship the work of their own hands, that which their own fingers have made. Jesus Christ, Ishtar, Semiramis, Baal, Balaam, Dagon, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. The list goes on. Juneteenth, 4th of July. The list constantly keeps going on. And it further shows, man, this is the reason why our people are destroyed, man, because it was, again, our fault. I mean, we say, Thawadi Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai, man. As much of an abomination that our people worship this freak Jesus Christ, mind you, they actually had games going on where they had to pick up enough marbles. And if they did, they picked up the most amount of marbles, then they'd participate in orgies, freak-offs. Same exact thing that you see going on in the Hollywood industry. Just like that. Thawadi Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai, man. But also Shalak Rayam unto this place, man, because it's all full of wickedness, right? The very thing, this place was made for our destruction, for our imprisonment. It's shackles. That's what this place is. It's shackles unto us. And in fact, most of them are the very ones that our people created. Christianity, created by our people. Merging gods, created by our people. Even that white Jesus, to this day, but even back then during the Renaissance, our people helped with that as well. Right? Because they're the ones who influenced it. Our people are the very ones who, hung Yahweh Shai. By the Lord's will, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, Bahashem Rekah HaKodash, and Shalom.